So here we are, the last ever supplement for MESBG before it gets booted off into the landfill to be replaced by a currently still mysterious new addition. While we will talk about that, it did introduce some profiles of models I have wanted for ages. One of the big ones being the Men of Carn Doom, a concept that exists for literally a single sentence in the lore, but have appeared in various secondary media projects over the years, including as profiles and older versions of our own ring-oriented tabletop spat. While the models do look good, and it's fun just how directly based on the War in the North design they are, they're just not my Men of Carn Doom. Which is honestly great, because f*** those prices. So it was time to get to work and finally mock up some of my own bad boys as we kit bash and paint up some Warriors of Carn Doom. This is a project I've had in the back of my mind for a while, but since they didn't have profiles, I was just planning on running them as orcs in my Angmar army like I do my Rudor boys. However, I just could never pull the trigger, but now that they actually have profiles, we're doing it. But the plan is pivoting. For the longest time I wanted to use the Oathmark Revenant infantry as a base for them, as I liked the style of their armor. The fluff in my head is that there was once some ancient sect of men, either related or precursors to the eventual Numenorians, with the current warriors of today either being distant descendants of these people who lived in the far reaches of the north, or the original people themselves, kept alive or reanimated by the darkness seeping back into the world. While these guys do kind of hit that vibe, as I mentioned last time, money be bad right now. So I once again decided to take a stab at making some of these guys without buying any new models, and I think I came up with something cool. I ended up grabbing some scale mail wearing bodies off of the Fireforge infantry sprues, as these not only look pretty cool on their own, but definitely match up with the Rings of Power inspiration of my Numenorians. Next was finding arms, and these were a bit trickier as I didn't want to use the same ones from my Numenorians, but I wasn't really happy with many of the other ones I found. However, I ended up picking up the plate mail arms for the Perry Miniatures Agincourt sets, as I felt like these matched the intricate armor of my wraiths and offered a decent selection of poses as well. The heads then were a tricky one as well. For a while now, I've thought that the Byzantine helmets from Fireforge would be perfect for this. However, in the end, they just felt too normal to me. As I mentioned, I like the idea of these being a truly ancient people who may or not even be alive, so I decided I wanted fully closed helmets to lend to that uncertainty. With it decided, I kept looking around and just wasn't finding anything that really hit for me, until I pulled out some Hail Caesar Macedonians I got on sale a couple of years ago for an early stab at a Numenor army before I got into the Rings of Power look. In particular, each sprue has one helmet with a full face mask, and I just love it. The helmet itself is a weird shape, and the face mask just hides any humanity these guys may have had. So I assembled up a set of these with a mix of both hand weapons and spears. However, I opted not to go with the maces that the official ones have, as none of that is going to matter soon. I also made a banner, which I capped with the end of a Warrior of the Dead's axe, as the shapes match up nicely to the Angmar terrain I've made, and I built a simple flag out of some construction paper to go with it. I also threw together a leader figure using some extra helmet plumes, a cape, and a fancier sword from the Age of Sigmar Hobgrots. And while I was planning on using him as a new named hero, I'm actually not that crazy about how he turned out, so I may just use him as a captain in the end. But with all those built, I based them up and we moved on to painting, which we've talked about before. So in the meantime, let's have a chat. Hi there. So this is a little bit different, but I decided I wanted to talk to you just a little bit off the cuff. A little bit off the cuff about this book. Yeah, so this is the last ever supplement for the Middle-earth strategy battle game, at least as we know it in the current edition. And I've heard a lot of people say that this may be the best edition ever. It's really good, and I wish I felt the same way. Honestly, I hate this. I don't necessarily hate the book itself, but I hate everything that it makes me feel. The book itself is fine. It introduces some new profiles and new stuff that do seem relatively interesting. I am excited to try them out. However, there's not going to be a lot of time to try it out before everything changes again, so that's something. But there is some good stuff in there. However, it really does feel quite stretched. There's a lot of pages in here that I feel are unnecessary and only serve to make the book longer, because it's honestly pretty thin compared to some of the other supplements, and it's a lot more expensive, as it's been a while since we've gotten new Middle-earth stuff, and the Games Workshop pricing model has changed. And that's really it. I feel that however good some of the qualities of this book might be, and however they appeal to me in particular with the whole Angmar thing, I just can't separate my feelings about this book from the business around it. The fact that this will be outdated within 3 months, the fact that this was after such a huge break, the fact that it is so much more expensive, robbed this of any satisfaction that I could get from it. And that's sad, because honestly, this should be what I always wanted. I've been pushing Angmar and Arnor for years now. I think they're a fantastic part of the lore that's simply not addressed enough in the main rules. And so this should be everything I wanted, and I wish it was. But it just isn't. And it never could be. So maybe it's our fault for making this happen. Maybe it's all of the nasty business sides that I'm just being too sensitive about, but don't buy it. I bought it because I want to complete my collection and because the Angmar side of it has a particular meaning to me, but you don't need this book. So, yeah, this sucks, but let's get back to the models. I started off with the same two-tone prime I do for all of my Angmar stuff before moving on to the base coats, and in this case, I actually ended up referring back to one of my older videos. I wanted to match their colors specifically to my Witch King, and so I actually watched that old video to remind myself of what I had done, and there was some stuff I'd forgotten, particularly when it came to mixing colors. First of all, I had made a unique wood color by mixing gray with some warm brown to get a desaturated muted tone, which I applied to the spear shafts and boards of the shield. Then I mixed up a nasty off gold color by combining, well, gold, roughly 1-to-1 with a dark silver, before then adding in a dash of green to really throw it off. I applied this to the majority of the armor, however I did leave some elements like the blades, the metal banding around the shields, and the scale mail blank, as I would later go back in with the base silver to add some variety. This and the rest of the base cones were really simple, with just a dark red for the tunic, black for the pants, and a warm brown for any straps or leather elements that were left. And these look pretty garish right now. Like, I know the ugly phase is a real thing in mini painting, but these look really rough. And I really had to force myself to stick to the plan here, as I did do a test mini that turned out nice, but it's hard to remember that sometimes. So I quickly added a few extra details to the hero and banner bearer before dousing these guys in washes. As in the past, I did this with two main colors, starting with a dark blue for the base and bottom half, as well as the most prominent undersides, which I mixed with a brown over the rest before it had dried to get a nice transition. And these are already looking wildly better in my opinion. When it comes to the highlights, this is even more basic and repetitive, as I did all of them the same way I always do, mixing in a warm off-white to each of the original base colors and applying these in 2 or 3 increments of highlights. And yes, I did do this same technique for the metals, as I like the semi-non-metallic, unnatural look it gives me. Lastly, I did do a bit of recessed shading in black to push the contrast in places, before moving on to some finishing touches like sketching out the Angmar sigil on the banner and adding glowing eyes by first adding a drop of white into each socket and a thin layer of contrast paint over top. Finally, after hitting them all with a matte varnish, I added some blood effects to the sword of my hero captain by applying some mixed up gloss flesh shade with contrast paints to give a nice glossy look. And with that, my Angmar force is one step closer to completion, so please subscribe to the channel as I have some more plans that should be coming up very soon. Hopefully. And let me know how you feel about these compared to the official ones, as I actually really like how they turned out. I think they look really unique in a way that fits with my army, and I'm happy with the mix of models I used. Also, let me know what you think about the new supplement and edition, as I'm sure that will be a totally civil conversation. So thank you as always for being here. Be safe out there, and have a good one all.